Well, ladies and gentlemen, you tuned into the news today, and I must say that actually making these videos sometimes can be a little bit tough. Only insofar as it gets quite mundane. I mean, what am I going to talk about? ANC corruption, more ANC corruption. And I think all of that is fitting because in today's episode, we're going to be talking about ANC corruption. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, please subscribe to the channel. The channel and many YouTube channels at the moment are going through a little bit of a slump, predominantly because of the mass uploading of AR videos on YouTube, and we can really see it in our back-end analytics. So help us out and actually share this video amongst your friends. So let's get on to the main video of today. So let's actually start off with Home Affairs. Now don't forget that Home Affairs is currently being run by Leon Schreiber, a DA minister. Well, an SIU investigation has found that Home Affairs officials have been selling visas and permits illegally. Basically, they've been paid a bribe, typically ranging between $500, yep, that's how much it costs to get your citizenship in South Africa, and around $3,000 per permit. Now, the payments are made via e-wallets because that way they're not traceable. Usually, the cash is hidden in application forms or in kind benefits. Now, applications were sent to Home Affairs via WhatsApp to officials for fast tracking, and a syndicate of 4 officials allegedly received over 16 million rand in unexplained deposits. Now, one official alone received nearly 9 million rand over 3 years in this corruption scheme. Now, typically, the officials involved earned around 25,000 a month, basically according to the studies, and the SIU has so far made 275 criminal referrals to the MPA. Now, that suggestion that the criminal referrals to the MPA have occurred are actually, for me as a citizen of the state, what's kind of concerning, because the MPA isn't exactly efficient. So what we may have here is the SIU has clearly found individuals who have been selling citizenship or visas to the country and aiding our unemployment crisis, but the MPA will probably not really actually do anything about it. Remember that this is one of the main international criticisms and was one of the criticisms leveled against South Africa in the grey listing allegations. The fact that we've had over 100 illegal immigrants deported following this investigation is like a drop in the ocean. It's amazing how the government's like, look, we've done something. We've referred 275 people to the MPA and deported 100 people. If you actually take the figures according to the SIU itself, well, remember the SIU says that they think that there's been roughly around 16 million in unexplained deposits. Remember, that's going to be the tip of the iceberg, right? One official, as I said, alone made 9 million rand over 3 years. But let's just say on the basis that these were 16 million rands in fraud, okay? And they're saying that the top end for an application is like $3,000 per permit. Just divide 16 million by 3,000 and you'd get basically near 5,500 individuals bought applications via this route. And the government's like, yay, we deported 100 people. So what? Now, apparently Home Affairs confirms that they're doing internal disciplinary processes. So yeah, so they found the individuals, and the individuals haven't even been fired. They're all got to go through all the red tape in the country. I mean, if that's not exemplary of Retard Dunistan, well, I really don't know what is. Now, moving swiftly on to another form of ANC fraud, you've got to remember that one of the biggest frauds that has occurred in South Africa is the Tembisa hospital frauds. Well, according to the latest news, an individual has been appointed the CEO of another Free State hospital, but that individual was actually convicted in 2012 of defrauding the Mangaung Metro of over 5 million rand. Now, the fraud in that instance occurred between 2000 and 2005, and what they've effectively did is they channeled funds through employers' personal bank accounts. Now, this specific appointment has got many individuals worried because we've seen how the looting epidemics in places like Tembisa goes unchecked. And now what we're expecting is to see this again because we've just appointed a fox to overview the henhouse. This is what we're left with when it comes through to the ANC. Pure, unadulterated retardation. Now, this appointment actually occurred with the officials who appointed him knowing full well about his criminal record. Apparently, a qualified acting hospital CEO at that actual hospital was bypassed, and the appointment was given to an actual individual who's been convicted of corruption. Now, the National Health Minister, Minister Moron, requested reports on the appointment and now wants to conduct an investigation as to whether political interference actually occurred in the recruitment process. So in other words, was this yet again another ANC getting a job? Now, this all comes at a time where NHI is at the forefront of everybody's minds because the NHI Act is currently going through the courts. But we look at the looting epidemics that have occurred now, both in home affairs, which has been detrimental to the country in terms of who we've allowed in and who we kicked out, and now we're looking at more looting epidemics in hospitals, and one is reminded all of this is occurring under Cyril Ramaphosa. The fraud still occurs under Cyril. Cyril, the great reformer, the anti-corruption guy, has not actually really rid the state of corruption at all. Now, we do have one saving grace, and that is Cyril's on his last term. Thank God the guy's about to go. But the question that everybody's asking is, well, who actually takes over from Cyril Ramaphosa? And the current suggestions are, well, Patrice Motsepe. But here's the problem. Patrice doesn't actually want to stand. He's made it very clear that he doesn't actually want to stand as the ANC's president. But the ANC itself are lobbying for him to take over as ANC president. Now remember, he's actually intimately linked to Cyril Ramaphosa himself through family connections. Now, Motsepe has stepped down from his executive role at Africa Rainbow Minerals, but he remains a non-executive chair and a board member of that company. Now, if he obviously runs the country, he has to step away from that too. Now, were he to run as ANC president and ultimately become president of the Republic, he would have to step down from all his JSE governance requirements. And Motsepe has previously declined entering into politics because of what it will mean to his actual business endeavors. Now, he has donated to multiple political parties before. He's not really just like an ANC guy through and through. But the survey data shows that around 50% of ANC voters prefer Motsepe as Cyril Ramaphosa's successor. Now, more interestingly, there are other ANC figures who actually rank higher in internal supporting polls than Motsepe himself. But you got to remember, if you're Cyril Ramaphosa and you want to avoid any form of accountability for anything that you may or may not have done whilst in government, Motsepe is the logical answer. Like, you can get a family member, he's then the next president of the Republic, the next president of the ANC, and effectively he'll leave you alone, right? Because obviously what you end up doing is protecting your family members. And this is not being lost on a number of individuals. So the question really has to be is, will Motsepe actually take over the ANC presidency? Well, the ANC is pushing for it pretty hard. But he knows it's going to financially hurt him a lot. And Cyril's very keen on it because it'll act as a form of buffer or protection of him himself. It's going to be very interesting to see how the leadership succession race actually progresses with the current ANC insiders. Now, moving swiftly on, let's look at our favorite retarded political party, also known as ActionSA, because ActionSA were caught at the weekend for using party members in staged street interviews. Now, ActionSA actually released campaign videos presented as random street interviews. And the idea was meant to be that they would interview random people in the public and they'd say, we love ActionSA, we're voting for ActionSA. But that's not actually what happened, because investigations into these interviews identified that many of the interviewees were actually ActionSA members or officials. Now, these individuals appeared without any disclosure of party affiliation, so they were meant to look like they were completely independent. But the reality was that many of them were affiliated to the party, so this spontaneous street interviews was anything but. It was actually an electioneering ploy. Now, ActionSA's leader, Herman Mashaba, has denied any wrongdoing and says this was perfectly legit, and said that supporters naturally appear in public campaigning. And you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Was ActionSA wrong to do this, or was it like perfectly legit? I mean, they tried to do some party politics to promote their party by doing random interviews that weren't random at all. And in case, let me know what you think of that in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Now, on to some other more interesting articles. And the next one actually comes around Starlink, because according to the current news, Starlink has offered to invest 500 million rand in South Africa, were it to be granted a license. And the project is aimed to connect 5,000 rural schools. This, Elon says, he would do for free for the country in exchange for a license. Now, Starlink suggests that it will provide internet access to over 2.4 million learners annually. But currently the project is currently on hold because the South African regulator, ICASA, still requires a 30% black ownership for any form of telecom licenses, which ultimately means that rural communities and farmers aren't being provided with Starlink despite having made numerous calls for it. But you see, this itself is actually becoming a lynch point of the ANC's legacy, because what we're seeing is that the country itself could do numerous forms of advancement were the ANC just to let go of some of its ideology. Now, the reality is, were the ANC just to be a little bit pragmatic, 2.4 million learners would suddenly find themselves with fast and reliable internet. But our government is so hooked up on its own juju that it just cannot see beyond itself. Now, where we saw this most noticeably was actually in Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. And many of the comments that Ramaphosa made around white South Africans are still being debated on the internet. Because to be frank, even I watched his address and I was actually pretty shocked by what I can only describe as outright hostility to the white population. As an example, have a watch of this clip.
Objective of our Constitution, which is embedded in the opening lines of our Constitution, talks about redressing the injustices of the past. We cannot do that without transforming the various aspects of South African life, but more particularly the economy. It cannot be acceptable to anyone in this house for African people, colored people, and Indian people to be poorer and have fewer opportunities than white people. It cannot be acceptable. And remembering that that was the order of the day in the past, and it can therefore never, 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 never be acceptable that that should continue. Because that is what defined our life under apartheid, where it was legislated, where it was practice and protocol, convention and experience that Africans, Indians and coloreds should forever be denied by law to participate in the economy of the country. It cannot be acceptable that anyone in this house would want.
Now, really what Ramaphosa should be talking about is form of governance and accountability and the rampant corruption that has occurred underneath the ANC's government. But instead, what he seems to constantly do is blame the previously advantaged and says that all of life ills are basically due to them. Again, let me know what you think of that in the comments section below. Now, onto a very final news story, and that is the news story around Mugabe's son. Now, if you watched my video from last week, you'll know that he got arrested in Johannesburg for shooting at his garden boy. Now, according to the latest news, as I told you last week, he was arrested in Johannesburg, and he was due to actually go before a bail hearing, but the actual bail itself has been opposed. So he's now being remanded in custody. Now, he faces charges of attempted murder and firearm-related offences. At the moment, nobody is commenting on whether or not the firearm was legally registered to the individual as a foreign national or not. Now, the case itself has been postponed for a formal bail application, but the state has said that they will be opposing the application. Now, the firearm allegedly used in the incident has not been recovered. And since being in custody, Mugabe has apparently collapsed twice in custody due to medical conditions. Now, logically, as an attorney, I'm looking at this already and saying, I can see what's going to happen here in the case itself. First, they're going to say that there's no evidence of the firearm that was used in the event, so they will call into question the admissibility of the evidence, and the second will be to say that a prolonged trial would be detrimental to the individual's medical health, and that because of medical conditions, he should be, allowed to go free. I can see exactly how this is being positioned immediately, but what this may show you is, yet again, just how useless the NPA is and how forms of prosecution in this country just really don't go far. Which is exactly why, coming back to the original point made on the Home Affairs incident, the allegation that these things have all been referred to the NPA doesn't inspire confidence in the general public. Anyway, these are just my views. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your views on the stories. And until next time, bye.